It has been women who have borne the brunt of the job cuts due to COVID-19, and for generations, they have also borne the brunt and carried the lion's share of work around the home, including childcare itself. According to the Department of Labor, women are the breadwinners in at least 40% of households with children under 18. And during COVID-19, they've also taken on the added role of being a teacher to their children, along with often full-time childcare responsibilities. To help us understand how much of a cost that is putting on our country's economy and just our continuing ability to function as a society, we're joined by economist Betsey Stevenson of the University of Michigan. She previously served as a member of the Council of Economic Advisors and as the chief economist at the U.S. Department of Labor. So good to have you here talking to us, Betsey.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So it's not an easy question, but what is the outlook on American families and American working women in the midst of this virus?
Women have sort of gotten a 1-2 punch from this virus. The first punch was the fact that they lost jobs more than men did as things shut down. I've called it a gendered shutdown because a lot of women were do the types of jobs that just they couldn't do remotely. So they faced a lot of the layoffs. And, you know, to put that in perspective, our economy is largely a service-based economy. You know, more than 80% of the jobs are service-based jobs. Services are not just serving each other coffee, but there are a lot of caretaking jobs, and women disproportionately fall into those caretaking jobs, and those all got sent home at the very beginning. And on the childcare front, a lot of the people who got laid off early on were the childcare workers. When we saw the last jobs report, we've seen a lot of jobs coming back, but there are still 20% fewer people working in childcare than there was a year ago. So we're still not bringing all the childcare workers back. And that's a problem, primarily women who do childcare work, and for the parents and families who rely on sending their kids to childcare. The challenge is it's hard and expensive to run childcare safely right now. We need to be able to be doing some kind of social distancing with the kids. There's things that childcare centers need to do, and a lot of them just can't bring in the revenue to make up those extra costs. A lot of parents don't necessarily feel comfortable, so we don't even see all the slots being there.
I know the Census Bureau and Fed have this joint study that just came out. It says that around 1 in 5 of working age adults say the reason they're not going back to their jobs right now was because the virus disrupted their childcare arrangements. And of those not working, women 25 to 44 are almost 3 times as likely as men to not be working due to childcare demands. So this is a huge portion of getting the economy going again. Why is this not being addressed?
You know, it's not as simple as saying, well, let's just open up every childcare facility, let's open up every school and pretend that there's no virus. So what it would take would be a really organized, concerted effort at the federal, state, and local level, working together to try to figure out how we do the best we can for our kids. And honestly, that's just not happening. So we need money from the federal government to be able to improve the infrastructure. We also need money from the federal government to help with flexibility. You know, I think there are lots of creative things we could have done. We could have all the university students stay home because they seem to be giving each other COVID, and we could use the infrastructure of the universities to educate our younger children in a socially distanced way, as long as the federal government stepped in with some subsidies that made sure the universities weren't going bankrupt, right? There are alternatives. We could turn all of our high schools into early childhood learning centers, into Head Start programs. There's lots of flexibility and things we could do, but that takes government that is really working well. And I think that's just not where our government is. It's not, you know, we don't see federal, state, and local governments working, you know, with one single goal in mind, which is minimize the damage to families and kids. That's what they'd have to do. And we just haven't seen any of that.
There's been talk about putting together some kind of emergency aid for childcare centers. Of course, all aid is completely stalled at this moment because Congress isn't able to agree on anything. But that number was about $50 billion that was being talked about for child care centers. What's the best way to actually use that money?
Let's put those numbers in perspective. So $50 billion is the amount of money that we gave to airlines in March when we were worried that this pandemic might bankrupt our airlines. So why does the government step in and hand $50 billion over to airlines? They do it because they think a modern economy will struggle to reopen and get going again if our airlines go bankrupt. What apparently very few people thought was a modern economy will struggle to get going again if we have bankrupt all our childcare centers. So we need to be putting the same kind of priority, understanding that childcare is an infrastructure. So you asked, what would we spend that money on? I mentioned earlier that it's more expensive right now to do childcare. You're going to need more workers. You're going to need more disinfecting breaks. You're going to need to potentially improve the airflow in the buildings. A lot of these, childcare centers are really in, not very good infrastructure. And that's true for our elementary schools as well. Our elementary schools, some of them are very old. They don't have good air filtration. And so there's a lot of concern about what happens when they're all trapped indoors with air not circulating very well, the same way you might be concerned with an airline. The airlines got that money and they work to try to make air travel safe. We want to give the money to childcare so they can try to make childcare safe. But it's also the case that we have to make sure that we don't end up losing the childcare workers, that we don't end up losing the childcare centers, because when people come back, when we're finally able to go back and do everything, we don't have the slots, then you're going to have some mom with a 6-month-old who's told it's a 4-year waiting list before she gets childcare. We definitely saw that pre-pandemic, and we're going to see that a lot more post-pandemic.
We know with virtually every single statistic related to this virus that it hurts and impacts disproportionately people of color. So how is that to be addressed? When I ask this question of, say, people who work in government or in school districts, they say, oh, well, we're sending MiFis. We're helping give, internet access, as if that solves all the problems. If you're a parent who doesn't speak English, how do you teach your child at home?
I think that we all need to realize that this problem, this fact that we are basically abandoning our children for some period of time right now, not giving them the education they deserve, is going to be with us for the next 20 or 30 years unless we all rally together and decide to fix the problem. We're going to see a massive increase in inequality. We know that. We see just over the course of the summer a gap in kids who come from privileged, higher income, higher education backgrounds come back in the fall more prepared to learn with less summer melt than kids from more disadvantaged backgrounds. There's not a consensus in terms of how hard or easy it is to make that up, but we do know that these gaps continue to widen over the summer. This gap, now we're talking about a year really of not appropriate, of not being in school and getting sort of equal access to education. You're going to have some kids who are getting teachers at home, one-on-one instruction, and then you're going to have other kids whose parents basically just, cannot do it, and no matter how much they're trying. And that inequality is going to cause really big social problems. It's also going to subtract from our economic growth. It's got to be addressed. And we're going to have to say as a nation that we're going to invest in making it up to our kids. We're going to spend more on education. We are not going to let the state and local revenue shortfalls lead us to lay off teachers in the coming year or two, exactly when our kids need us to be spending more than ever to try to catch them up. There are studies that suggest that these kids could be losing 5 to 10% of their income over the course of their lives from this year that they miss. That's a lot of money, and we should be throwing money at the problem to try to help those kids and therefore help ourselves, our future selves, as these kids grow up and are the ones who are running the economy.
Much of the public rhetoric around this issue has been open or shut, keep the schools open, shut them down. Have you heard either of the two candidates for president or their campaigns in any way articulate the kind of plan that you're calling for?
I have not heard either candidate spell out, exactly how they're going to make it up to the kids, which I think is, we really want to hear what what are we going to do to catch these kids up and create equality? You do have a Vice President Biden does have a plan to spend more on childcare and on caregiving and on education that is not necessarily pandemic related, but will help accomplish some of these goals. But I agree with you that right now in this present moment, the rhetoric is really focused around open or not. And that's really a mistake, because the virus determines whether we open or not. Mm-hmm. But we decide what we're going to do for our kids and how we're going to pull together for our nation, as a nation, to do it. And we have a lot of opportunities to do the right thing by our kids and by families.
More broadly on the economy, given your past work, I wonder what you think of the claims being made by the Trump campaign and by the president that he built an economy out of what was a decimated country when he took office.
And when I look at what we have, and I look at how bad he was, how ineffective a president he was so ineffective, so terrible, slowest growing recovery in the history, I guess, since 1929 on the economy. Now, President Obama did not do a good job. And the reason I'm here is because of President Obama and Joe Biden. Because if they did a good job, I wouldn't be here.
I feel like he's sort of channeling Obama 2008 there. President Obama certainly walked into a decimated economy in 2009. The country was losing 800,000 jobs a month. This looked like really the worst recession we had ever seen. And if you're going to criticize the economy under Obama, the criticism is that the progress to rebuild the economy was slow but steady. Slow but steady. He built an economy that became the little engine that could, and it kept on going. It wasn't a V-shaped recovery. That's the criticism. But that's what Trump inherited, was an economy that was on an upward path. He did not change the trajectory one bit. You can look at every kind of data. There was no change in the trajectory under Trump. So the only thing Trump can claim is he didn't crash the Obama recovery, not that he inherited an economy that was decimated. We haven't seen any evidence that he knows how to rebuild an economy, and we've actually seen no evidence that President Trump even understands how much damage has been done to the economy currently. When the jobs reports come out and they tell us that, yes, some of these temporary layoffs are being recalled, he celebrates it as the greatest, job growth we've ever had. It's not job growth. It's that some people are being temporarily recalled to jobs they already had. What's the plan to build new jobs? Mm-hmm. I have not seen under Trump's presidency his ability to think about how do we move into the 21st century economy, which is a service-based economy. We need professional services, the kind of services we export. How does he build those? How does he encourage their growth? And how does he train workers for it? How does he retrain people who've never been in those industries? I mean, there's just nothing there in terms of plans.
It's going to be a big challenge for whoever is in office come January. Thank you so much. We're going to continue to talk about all of these issues, and I really appreciate your time.
It was great talking with you.